fascinating conversation. There will be opening remarks by Secretary Posner, but then there will be truly a conversation with the rest of you. So with that, please join me in bringing to the dais here Dean Ernest Wilson.
It is really a great pleasure to welcome all the way from Washington, D.C., Michael Posner, who's the Assistant Secretary of State to the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. As you can see, that covers all the important stuff many of us are concerned about. Michael was sworn into this position about 2 years ago, but prior to his government service, he had a long and distinguished career in the protection of human rights, in political asylum, fair labor practices, free expression, and internet privacy. Prior to joining the State Department, he served as the executive director and then the president of a well-known human rights organization that many of you are aware of, I'm sure, of Human Rights First. He led that organization to international respect and stature in areas such as refugee protection, challenging crimes against humanity, and combating discrimination. Michael's leadership is evident in many of the laws and initiatives that have shaped contemporary approaches to human rights and digital freedoms. I think he's a great example of one individual making a difference, working with groups, of course, but one individual with vision and passion can make a difference. Let me give you just a few examples. He played an absolutely key role in proposing and campaigning for the first U.S. law providing for political asylum, the very first, which became part of the Refugee Act of 1980. As a member of the White House Apparel Industry Partnership Task Force, he helped found the Fair Labor Association, an organization that brings together corporations, local leaders, universities, and NGOs to promote accountability for working conditions in the apparel industry. He was also involved in the development of an organization that I'm familiar with and do some work in called the Global Network Initiative. And this also is a multi-stakeholder initiative aimed at promoting free expression and privacy on the internet. So the Secretary, as you see, is a firm believer in bringing together different voices from different parts of society across different institutions to talk about very important topics. One of those important topics is our discussion today on internet freedom as a foreign policy priority for the United States moving forward. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, Michael Posner.
Thank you, Dean Wilson. It is a pleasure for me to be here, and I want to thank Cowan also for inviting me. And I want to honor you both for everything you've done arguing to build the Annenberg Center as a leading venue for thought and discussion of some of the most critical issues of our time. I'm really eager to be here, delighted to be here to talk to journalists, aspiring journalists, public policy thinkers about internet freedom, which I think is one of the seminal free speech issues of our generation. As most of you know, our section of the State Department, the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, is charged with helping to maintain the internet as an open space for free expression of all people. My boss, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, has made internet freedom a foreign policy priority, and Congress has given us $70 million to fund technology, training, and policy advocacy for internet freedom around the world. We funded a range of programs and trainings aimed at keeping activists in the most repressive societies safe, including a number of Syrians who tell us they are now using what they've learned in their current struggle for political freedom. Some of you may have read about the panic button, which is developed by one of our grantees. This now comes in both Nokia and Android versions, and they have encrypted voice and SMS capabilities. These were developed in response to what we heard from democracy and human rights activists on the front lines. If they're being arrested, as they often are, they can push a button that sends a text message to people to let them know they're in trouble. And it wipes out their contacts on their phone, which I have been told has already proved useful. We're making progress, but it's a struggle. And before we open the discussion, I want to outline 3 trends that are of deep concern to us. First, it's not new, of course, but we're confronting the increased attempts by some governments to control their citizens' peaceful online activities. Under international human rights law, people have the right to express themselves, and I quote, through any media regardless of frontiers. Yet interference from states continues in endless, nefarious, and inventive forms. The Committee to Protect Journalists has done an excellent job tracking these tactics, from illegal illicit surveillance and hacking to offline intimidation of bloggers to total internet shutdown. The Obama administration has staked out a principled stand by arguing that the rights of free expression, free assembly and association apply online just as they do to offline activity. Although it may be more difficult to enforce certain rights in the digital age, as authors, artists, and inventors are discovering. But the principles are the same. You don't break into a movie theater and steal film reels, and you don't have the right to steal movies online either. Second, we're seeing a growing number of repressive regimes get a hold of the latest, greatest Western technologies and use them to spy on their own citizens for the purpose of quashing peaceful political dissent or even information that would allow citizens to know what's happening in their own communities. Journalists, bloggers, and activists are, of course, the primary targets. I'm sure many of you saw the reports about rebels several weeks ago overrunning Colonel Gaddafi's internet surveillance boiler room in Tripoli and finding it stuffed with Western technology. It's a complex story, but one I hope the media will follow and explore in depth. There are no easy solutions because, of course, the United States wants people in every country to have access to the newest connection technologies, including people in repressive places. And we want to allow our tech industry a free rein for innovation, avoiding onerous regulations as much as we can. At the same time, the use of technologies by repressive governments to suppress fundamental freedoms and freedom is an ongoing concern. At the State Department, we are monitoring this issue very closely, and we are urging companies to work together with like-minded governments and NGOs to figure out ways to minimize such misuse. Some companies are already doing this by designing innovative fixes to help their products protect users. In some cases, their young customers, they well know, are the Václav Havels and the Nelson Mandelas of the next generation. And we need to make this dialogue real, because the third disturbing trend, which I would argue has not received the attention it merits, is the growing efforts to give countries more control over how the internet is governed, to cut companies and civil society out of the conversation on shaping the internet's future. To give you one example, last month in New York, the governments of China and Russia, with support from others, came to the UN to suggest the need for an international code of conduct for information security. Were such a code to be enacted, it would almost inevitably erode media freedoms, and it would shift cyberspace away from a people-driven system to a system dominated by centralized government control. This is not a good idea. As I said at the outset, I've come here to exchange views, and so I look forward to our conversation about how together we can defend freedom and on these tough issues that are now playing out in some of the hardest places in the world. Thank you.